Keena's here. She's got some stuff for everybody, it looks like. I will call the Curry County Budget Committee meeting to order, May 1st at 1 p.m. And please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
All right, first up on our agenda is amendment and approval of the agenda.
I don't have any amendments. I'll move to approve the agenda. I'll second that.
Motion and a second, all in favor?
Yes. Yes.
And yes, motion passes 3-0. Now, public comments. Few people in the audience today that I recognize, but anybody want to make a public comment? Nick? No?
I'm good.
Okay. All right, no public comments. We will move on to the big moment of the day, which is our discussion item, and that's you. That's you, Keena.
So a couple things I'm gonna hand out first of all.
Okay.
Are a few different things we need to kind of look at that we're doing a little bit different this year than other, sorry. So, what we're doing a little bit different this year than in past years is I have put together an ICAP, which is an indirect cost allocation plan. And an ICAP is a routine governmental accounting overhead expenses. So it's really the umbrella. It's the HR, the IT department, the finance department, those departments that every fund within the county has, that uses to support their funds, that they don't do independently. These are the indirect overhead costs that can be billed back by the roads department. This is, can be added onto their billing rate. Any other services that we're billing out to, grants, contracts, intergovernmental agreements. Again, sorry, I've been running around trying to get this done. We can bill out against those as well, because it's the cost of doing business. It's the billing rate, a portion of that billing rate that we can allocate out. That's something that the county hasn't done in the past. So we're essentially leaving money on the table, or we're eating the cost of billing rates for the road department. They're just doing salary fringe. That doesn't take into account payroll, finance, all these other intergovernmental transfers that they really have to pay for in addition to just the salary fringe. So what I have done, what's in front of you is just the personnel services of the salary fringe, and then we have the M&S portion of each department that falls within those salary fringe. And then we come up with a total overhead indirect cost for doing the services of the administration. There's different ways then, or different methodologies that can happen then to allocate these costs out. One of the easiest ways to allocate these costs out is by FTE. That way each fund is paying their appropriate share of all those services it takes to support. So what I've done is have taken the total personnel services and M&S for all these funds that are in administration, came up with a dollar figure, and then at the time that you're creating these ICAPs, you have to have a base number to work off of. So I started with 119.5 FTE because that's what the county had on the books at the time that I was providing or creating this FTE. So then each employee indirect rate then comes out to being $23,148 of administrative support annually. If you divide that by 2080, I think it's like $12 and some odd cents. And that would be the overhead cost on top of the salary fringe cost that you would be able to bill out for those times. Any question about the ICAP portion? I know it's a lot of information. But again, this is a standard methodology that, let's say we're doing a job for ODOT. This is a methodology that ODOT approves and accepts with several government agencies across the state. It's how you came to those overhead costs is what we have to justify, and this is the easiest and most common way to justify it. So, being that this is a set amount that we base our budget off, it's a quarterly charge that we would charge each of the funds that uses the administrative services. And it's a flat rate, not based on their salary, not based on their payroll or their expenditure amounts, it's a flat rate. So then potentially at the end of a fiscal year, you can either over collect or under collect on your administration. If your FTE or expenses in your administration is lower than what we originally budgeted, then we would over collect, right? So then it's the commissioner's decision at the end of a fiscal year if we've over collected. There's different things that can happen with that money. One of the things that can take place is that the commissioners can make the decision to use that as contingency money. If the county was to shut down tomorrow, it's not like administration shuts down at that point. Departments have to shut down, and then administration would have to liquidate assets, they'd have to make sure we paid all our liabilities, so on. So it could be an emergency contingency plan for a nightmare. It could be allocated back to each of the funds. If you over collect, then you can say, okay, we over collected by $200,000. We're gonna allocate that back, so your indirect cost rate for the following year would be decreased by that appropriate share. Several different ways that they can handle it. But it's a way to protect your general fund, making sure that your general fund isn't paying for more than its share, essentially. And one thing that I had noticed when I was going through, there was really not a methodology when you were looking at the IGS transfers, which in your prior budgets, there's a big IGS transfer that we were doing for like 12 different things, and there wasn't really any methodology of how this fund paid that much and this fund paid another amount. So this is fair to all funds across the board. Any question from the commissioners or anybody? I hope I simplified that the best I could.
In terms of efficiencies, I know in the past, there's been a lot of transfer in, transfer outs for every single different ancillary service or administrative cost. So this would eliminate that and make it a one cost item.
Correct.
Okay. Which also will save on staff time and we'll have a lot less fumbles.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And then if anybody ever wanted to question, because there's some contracts that will come back, you know, if we're a subrecipient of an award and question any indirect or charges that we have against something. This is our proof that we have thought it through. It's showing that it's not unfair because we're billing the federal government versus the state government versus, you know, an intergovernmental agreement. It just kind of justifies across the board that it's a universal rate that we charge everybody for services.
The 118.50 FTE, is that our current PCR?
That is what it was when I did this a month ago. I'm not sure if it's changed.
Okay.
So I would assume it's very similar.
That's about 10 less than I thought it was, so.
There have been less positions. I mean, there's an open position in the finance department. There's 2
Yeah.
open positions in the DA's office. There's I think, don't you have open positions, the sheriffs? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, I thought that number was 120 something, but
Well, originally, at the beginning of the fiscal year, I believe it was close to low 140, like 141.
Then it was 137.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so.
So, yeah, it just, now, correct me if I'm wrong, but essentially, if should those positions become filled, will that reduce the, let's say, next year, okay, the levy passes, and the sheriff brings on 6 extra deputies, so our PCR goes up by that number minimum,
Yeah.
right? Would the overall costing amount
The
be
undercollected?
yes, the average per person,
It could be undercollected, and then you could do the same thing if you wanted to increase indirect costs for the following year.
but it also could, the number could actually decrease, would you be dividing it amongst more people? Okay, all right, I just wanted to make sure it goes the other direction as well,
Absolutely, absolutely. It's a fluctuating matrix based on
the pre-CO.
FTE at the time.
Yeah, okay.
Question on the allocation of some other expenses, so you have the finance department at the 192,
Yes,
and then are they also, are the FTEs, I don't see finance on that list,
because we don't pay ourselves. We're the administration.
right?
They're paying for us.
So the 119 is, of FTEs is without finance department?
Yeah, without the 3 of us.
I see. Thank you.
Is it also without some of the other administrative services, IT?
Correct.
Okay, so that's why the number
That's
is
what
what,
it
okay.
is, yeah.
That's why I couldn't figure out, it was a little bit lower than I had anticipated. So that does not include those administrative numbers. Okay, that makes more sense to me then.
How many more FTEs are there that aren't in the 119?
It would be on your front here of your personnel, those positions that are listed there.
I see.
So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17.
Got it.
This is 136.
There.
Any other questions? Okay. So, obviously, we are still waiting for our, study. We are, it's a 50-50 on whether it's going to pass. We all hope that it does. So what I'm presenting to you, again, this isn't the draft budget. This is the start of the process because we do not know exactly what it's gonna look like until we know the results of the levy. And then that's when we're gonna really start jumping in. So what I'm giving you is a potential prelim of what it's going to look like. So you guys can start looking at it, start asking questions. The sheriff's budget, as you can see, is short significantly compared to what it was last year. So you can start asking the questions of the sheriff of, what this entails and what it's going to affect to make those difficult decisions ultimately on a budget that you're going to recommend to the board. So I gave you the sheriff, right? Is that the first one, the sheriff's?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So,
Thank you.
Sheriff Captain Donald did a really good job going through expressing the shortfalls across the board. So the first one, special projects. If you look through the special projects on the first one, the total number is a little bit higher, but the transfers across are increased. You see that he is doing restricted, is this the one we're transferring special projects of $500,000?
Yes.
$550,000 to the patrol.
It would either go to, that'll be determined comment as to when, if what happens with the levy.
Sure.
Because honestly, moving it to patrol doesn't help the general fund. Moving it to the jail or communications helps the general fund, because you can't fill with road funds or other funds. I won't use road funds. You can't use other funds that are available to the county to backfill as much there as you can on the patrol side. So for this exercise, we moved it to criminal civil.
Okay, perfect. That particular fund doesn't have a ton of activity in it. As you can see, salary, fringe, kind of a placeholder amount, I think, in there. My suggestion would be to remove it entirely, since it's only 100 in each, and just plan a transfer.
Yeah, we do that in there, that specifically, so like when we have a fire, we bill, we get reimbursed, and then it doesn't mess up. We run the overtime and stuff through that, so it doesn't mess up our regular accounts. So that's why we just do a placeholder.
Any questions about special projects? No? Okay. So search and rescue, I think Julie accidentally printed 2 special projects. So
Yeah.
you might have to go skip a second one. So search and rescue, total cuts are almost $50,000 in this particular fund. It looks like their regular salary was decreased by $26,000. And ultimately, one of the things that I know the sheriff and the captain were discussing multiple times is that personnel is what is affected in the sheriff's department. It's not like there's a ton of M&S that can be cut within that department. Any questions? All right, so Maureen?
I'm sorry, I'm missing the 50,000 here.
At the total requirements from prior years, going over, it was $134,000 last year.
Do we just cut a person, there's one less person?
It would be a portion of an FTE.
But where's the proposed number?
The proposed number is to your right.
On the far right
Got
side.
it. Okay, thank you.
And I believe 90% of your cuts across the board are FTE, correct? Yes. And that's why I wanted to show you the general fund cuts as well as the sheriff's department, because these really are the ones that we need to pay the most attention to, because these are the funds that are going to be affected the most in the event the levy fails. The next one is Marine Patrol. Again, personnel services was cut about $20,000. And overall, requirements by about $15,000 in Marine. One thing you will notice is salary, or the salary may have been reduced. Fringe needs to stay within 60 to 65% of salary, which sometimes doesn't look like it's reduced enough, but we have those obligations for the CBA of different things that we need to make sure that we are covering. Health insurance, that was a big number. We luckily have a lower number for FY25, but these are general increases across the board. Full increase. Jail custody services. This is pretty much a status quo, small change status quo budget. You mind elaborating on custody services?
So the jail, we're required by law to have a minimum of 2 staff, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. We have to feed them, we have to take care of their medical issues, everything else, and the majority of our expenses, just like everywhere else, 90% of our expenses for the jail are personnel. We're minimal staffed as it is in the jail. I mean, we struggle having 2 per shift on days, so, I mean, if we cut any staff, we can't maintain what we're required by law to have. And then the only way we can reduce medical, and if this doesn't pass, we will have to reduce the number of people that we house in custody. I mean, the beds will still be there, but we just won't be able to afford to have someone in them. That's the only way you can save money is by reducing the food costs and the medical costs. Because whether you have 5 people in jail, or 25 people in jail, or 35 people in jail, we still have to have the minimum staff that's required by law. The only way to reduce that is by reducing the number of people that we hold. We can maybe cut 1 person, but that, I mean, we're already struggling to maintain the level. And then when you get to dispatch, it's the exact same thing. We run a 24/7 911 center. We can't, you know, it's not like Monday through Friday where everybody goes home at 5 and occasionally works an hour over. I mean, and just if whether the levy fails or passes, I mean, if it passes, we'll have more staff and we don't have enough dispatches. And if it weren't to pass, it's not going to reduce the call volume that our 911 center and our dispatch center is receiving. It's not going to change that.
Probably gonna go up.
And actually, whether it goes up or not, it will increase the length of every call that they're on. Because right now, you know, they can take some brief information and then dispatch it to a police officer that's on duty, whether it's sheriff's deputy or someone else. If this doesn't pass and we end up having to cut staff, now they're going to have to talk to people longer, trying to explain that, you know, and so it's a snowball. So and then when you look at some of the materials and services, we have contracts on maintenance for equipment and for software and for all kinds of stuff. I mean, you can cut $100 for the pencils and pens, but that's not the number that we need, so.
The next one's Civil and Patrol. I'm sorry, it looks like she gave you 3 copies of those. I promise, we will cut on paper.
Yeah, I was gonna say, this is just out of control.
A little crazy here. So Civil and Patrol, this is a big cut, big pain point. You will see that the total resources minus the road funds is $1,051,840. In order to make that work in a small fraction, they did decrease their personnel services of regular positions by $1 million. And obviously Fringe fell in suit with that, went from 2.8 million to 1.1 million. Materials and services, again, that was almost a cut in half, $350,000 cut in materials and services. With the resources of a little over $1 million, that left a shortfall of that $1 million cut in the Civil and Patrol by $527,000. So that is something that you guys are tasked with in order to meet that 31% shortfall. We would have to at least put in a little bit of money from something in order for it to be a balanced budget, and that would be.
So, I have a question, what was the reason for the big jump between 2023 and the actual and the 2024 budget? Was the budget always larger and we just didn't have staffing?
Correct.
Oh, okay, all right,
Vacant positions.
okay.
Yeah, and again, we're working off budgeted 24 numbers because that year's not done and audited. And so we won't have actuals until we're going into 26's budget for the year. We're always working off of budgeted numbers. questions? The next one's the jail. So it looks like in the past, looks like the tribal money provided the $1.994 million. Without those monies, the revenue in those funds would be $169,000. Looks like a $200,000 decrease in personnel services for salary, regular salary, and then again, the appropriate decrease for salary, or for the fringe portion of it. M&S, for jail services, most M&S has to be status quo in order to care for
On
them.
the other budget that we're talking about, that's just like a $64,000 budget. I had it mixed up. That's dedicated money that's only can be used, it's commissary, it's
Okay, commissary.
care prisoner, it's,
And that's self-funded,
yeah,
correct?
self-funded and, I had them mixed, I didn't realize.
I knew what you were meaning, though. I was picking it up,
I
yeah.
thought you were talking about that one.
One thing I do want to point out is, you see at the bottom of the jail and all of them, it still has the IGS transfers. Those IGS transfers are what will go away, and there'll be a one lump number for the indirect cost allocation. One thing that I did notice going through when I was talking about, there really wasn't a methodology from prior IGS transfers across the board. What I did notice is there was some sheriff's department funds that were per FTE paying significantly less in one and a little bit more in another. Occupancy, the sheriff and I were talking about that. That was high in some, but when you're looking at finance and payroll, personnel services that provide, excuse me, the majority of the services for the sheriffs, it was less. So the one indirect number balances out those issues, and there will be a one lump number in there for the transfers. Again, without any tribal money, it would be about $2 million short on the jail fund. Any questions about the jail? Okay. So communications, again, had a general fund transfer, a little over $1.1 million for last year. Without that, it has just resources of $322,000. They did reduce their salary fringe by $120,000 within this fund. And I don't know if it's reduced hours or FTE, but that one is decreased.
It's a combination of stuff.
Okay. And there's total revenues over resources, would leave them a $920,000 short in the sheriff's department, or in the, communications fund. So there would have to be some sort of plan in order to backfill.
So communications, that's towers, and dispatch, or
That's
just
dispatch.
just dispatch, okay. And so I see, we have money coming in. How do the cities, what do they pay? Is this,
Soul Beach pays roughly $40,000 for dispatch services. Port Orford pays somewhere around 25 to 28.
Yeah, somewhere around 28 now.
28.
We have a
3% increase every year.
we have 3-year contracts with them that we started out. We're in the second term of 3-year contracts, and every year they have a 3% increase built into them. So,
and how do you figure that? Do you figure it on the percentage of?
it was based on the call volumes at the time that they were originally done.
When it was originally done with the prior sheriff, it's kind of a handshake deal between the agencies, how much you're gonna pay. But now we had to have a contract to find out so there was no contract, so that's one thing that I got started. We'll have a contract with Gold Beach and Port Orford, and this is how much we're gonna pay based on call volume.
Is it possible to reevaluate those contracts due to increased costs across everything?
2 years, I mean, they have a signed contract with us.
That there's not any opener clause or anything for increased costs or services?
Not to my knowledge.
And they don't have the funds either, so.
And there's not, I mean, there's not enough money to pay for, I mean, not only do we get money from them, but we also get like all of Gold Beach's 911 tax money and all of Port Orford's 911 tax money, it all comes in there, so. I mean, they're paying in more than one way, they're paying for their 911 taxes, and they're paying a fee for their dispatch services, which all that is when one of their guys calls in on the radio, our dispatcher gives them the information they're looking for. That's their dispatch service, so, you know. And they pay for part of our CAD system, I mean, there's more than just that. I mean, that's just their dispatch fees that they pay, there's other fees that they pay on top of that, so.
There's no jail service fees, comes out of that.
For future revenues, you know, maybe that's something that we could add overhead charges into. Not to charge more to our neighbors, but just to ensure that we are allocating our costs adequately and trying to receive
Well, also,
the best.
we're
Providing a
if
service.
we're providing a benefit, yeah, and unequal benefits to different jurisdictions is a problem. So, it needs to be equitable, what everybody's putting in, you know, that's, and what everybody's taking out. So I think we just need to look at that and figure out
And we
what,
might even be able to go to group, or look into group, you know, a group grant type
yeah.
process as well.
It's a good example of a pretty unworkable system. I mean, I don't know how else you get this done.
Yeah.
So,
Well, the other piece that I think a lot of times we have to keep in mind as well is the city people pay the same tax rate as the county people as well. They pay the property tax as well. So they're paying into it via that as well as these other fees that are being taken in, so.
That's true. Any questions of the jail?
I will just point out that all that does is bring to light that no one, including myself, pays enough taxes to pay for the services the county's providing. And unless our levy passes,
Very
Right.
true.
That's the most equitable transfer of cost, right? I mean, is, so, yeah.
Absolutely. And the last page is just the forest, but that is a closed account. Our closed fund hasn't had activity.
Well, it actually has been removed into the civil criminal.
did you get parole and probation?
Yes, did I not go over that?
I don't think we went over.
Not yet.
there's no changes to parole and probation. They're 100% funded by state dollars. So not,
Oh, okay.
no county money at all goes into them.
Any questions about the sheriff's department? I know that is the biggest pain point of our budget. Again, that's why I just wanted to bring these to the board and the budget committee members to really start looking at, tossing around ideas, coming up with the questions, because we have little time to turn and burn as of May 21st to put together what we actually have to work with and get that through the budget process and approved.
So by this proposed budget by the sheriff, my math is that we would need to find 3.44
Just
million.
under 3.5 million.
Yeah, $3,440,434.
Correct.
Somewhere else.
Somewhere else. Somewhere other than the sheriff's office. That's they're short overall across all resources.
I just wanna point out, the sheriff and I have both discussed this numerous times, this is, if the levy doesn't pass, this is not our final proposal. This is just a exercise in what it would maybe
Right.
look like. I don't want us to be held to those numbers 100%.
All right.
They're not doable.
Okay, yeah,
They're not doable.
yeah.
And that's why I bring that, because in the event, as we stand, not backfilling with any tribal money, any general funds, any road funds, that's what you would be left with. That
Right,
is
but
not
it's a
doable.
completely hypothetical.
It's a
And so
completely
that's-
hypothetical, but you can see not doable because there's a $3.5 million
Shortfall.
shortfall. So it's not doable, because your budget has to balance.
But it's helpful, it's a helpful exercise,
It's a
so
very
we can
good
start getting
exercise.
some perspective and see what,
Well-
it certainly gives me a broader understanding of what's going on in each one of these departments, and I think, and when you look at it, you say, okay, how would you spend that money? I think that's a good thing to do.
Well, and the I guess the P90X portion of this marathon, this workout, this exercise, is the fact that if you add up probably the rest of all our departments, and if you minimize them to zero, we wouldn't get to $3.5 million to backfill
Hard.
these other areas. So that's the other pinch, right?
Right. I can volunteer or be at a work for free, that's as far as I can go.
And then I'll remind you guys also, for those of you that haven't been around very long or don't realize it, we talk about general fund, you guys are talking about general fund over here, and you're talking about the sheriff's office over here, but I want you to remember this, that it was, I think, 5 years ago, that someone that worked in the commissioner's office by herself moved the sheriff's office out of general fund into its own fund. The sheriff's office always has been and always will be a general fund obligation.
It is.
It's not, even though it's not, it's been moved out of the general fund and given its own fund on paper, it is a general fund obligation. So that is just something to remember for those of you that don't maybe realize that.
That's a very good point, and that's something that I've kind of been preaching as I've come into the county, is that we are one agency.
Yep.
All the funds, I don't care on paper what group or department they're in, we are all one agency. And we have the obligation to support everything and work together, and that's why we did the shortfall across all the funds, because it's not just the sheriff's department or the jail that needs to feel that. In order to support all the agencies' services, we need to be one.
Right.
We're unified. That's really important. Okay, so this is the general funds account. What you will see first is the Board of Property Tax and Appeal. That's a very small fund. It's money that the appraiser's office, no, the meantime, it's the property tax and appeals. It is the appraiser's.
Yep.
It's just kind of in and out, it's just for a little portion that they have to do by law. So not much changes within that.
But there's help from the clerk too, right, Shelley? I mean, 'cause-
No, that is funded through CAPA.
so, but Marcy
So
helps.
depending on how much money we get from the CAPA grant,
Yes.
it's not, I don't think it's 100% funded through CAPA. I think last year we got $1,900.
Yeah, so, and how CAFA works is it's between 17 and 20 cents to the dollar that it reimburses. So it's not like it's money dollar for dollar that we're getting. So, just a little
Question
fun,
real quick.
yeah,
I've heard that the county's getting some FIP money. Has that been factored into this?
yes, actually, we just talked, well, in the general fund.
General
Yeah,
fund?
yeah, and that's at the bottom, I'll get there, good question. So, little happens in that fund, it just goes in and out. So, the treasurer's fund, the treasurer is cut by 1 FTE, since Nick will be sworn in today as the county treasurer, we are dropped from 2 FTE to 1 FTE. So that reduced a significant chunk out of the treasurer's budget, about $50,000 across the board.
And you will be cleaning the courthouse.
And bathrooms, we forgot to tell you that's part of the deal, we have to clean the bathrooms. But, so about $50,000, which, one thing I did different in these general funds that you will see. Budgets, I don't, it doesn't matter if it's one of the budgets within the general fund, it's gotta be a balanced budget. You'll see in prior years, down at the bottom on the left, it shows you a deficit for FY '23 or FY '24 of $193,000. Your budget for that particular fund should be balanced to zero. Otherwise, it's very misleading because it makes it look like your non-department general fund has a ton of money, but really they were backfilling these funds. So what I've done is, you'll see at the top, I've done a transfer from general fund, non-departmental, and that's the portion of the non-department general fund that has to pay for the treasurer. And you'll see in every line, excuse me, in every general fund item, you're gonna see a transfer from non-departmental to, that is transparent, it's right there on the water. But that is transparent into the general fund that we're showing that money coming from that non-departmental to it, not just having an unbalanced fund at the bottom. Any questions about that? You'll also see the IGSs are zeroed out, and there's an annual indirect cost down there, which is the 23,148, which is just for Nick's position, and we are charging that budgets. He does go through payroll and everything else. Allocate those costs. Any questions about treasury? No? Okay. Tax collection. The tax collection accounts and the assessor's accounts, we spoke with the Department of Revenue, and we are obligated with an FTE floor in order to qualify for the CAFA grants. And if we go below that FTE floor, they will not provide us with any money, and that's leaving about $300,000 to $400,000 on the table. And when we're in a shortfall, we need to get all the money that we can get. Also, if we reduce FTE within the assessor's office or the tax collections office, your assessor's office are the people that go out and assess your property value, which then is what determines the tax that you're getting back in. So we're really shooting ourselves in the foot when you reduce that. We were advised by the Oregon Department of Revenue not to decrease our assessor's office. So they did issue a letter. I think it was taken to the commissioners. So this budget is proposing status quo for taxation and assessing.
As part of the growth that we've had in the assessor's office here recently is funding, staffing, appraiser positions and getting out there and actually getting our assessed values up to date, because some of them need to be caught up.
Yes. And what I also did is I trued up actual trued up actual personnel services within these two funds because they were not budgeted appropriately for last fiscal year. So,
And what was the floor for the FTEs for the CAPA reimbursement?
12.45, I think it was, and we're actually at 9, and they're bracing us. They're kind of giving us this grandfather pat on the back and sending us through. But told us at 9 and told us not to cut anymore. So good question though.
Yeah. Well, on this vein, that's kind of one thing I was curious about. We talked about, should the levy not pass, doing a blanket 30% across all departments.
So we'll work that way.
Yeah, sticking to the ones that create revenue, like assessors and the grants. As we go through this.
And also some of them have, like for example, the road department has already, over the last year, we've pared a lot of money out of it. So we're closer to a leaner machine there. And I think that might be true in some of the other departments as well. So we'll just have to look at it. It's gonna be kind of I mean, you're not gonna be just saying like, if the levy doesn't pass, we're doing 31% as of, as of the beginning of the fiscal year, because it's sort of these moving, shifting targets. So it's gonna be really complicated.
It really is. And there's some funds that aren't enterprise funds, but they're ran like enterprise funds. And so these standalone business type funds, Fairgrounds, for example, is one of them. Those are ones that you would want to cut because they're the ones that are self-supporting 100%.
Yeah, building
So-
planning,
Yeah.
parks.
So in building and planning, we did have them perform this cut exercise to potentially see what those look like, but with the caution of we're potentially losing revenue for code enforcement or code compliance, sorry, wrong term, but or issuing permits. So it really is this fine balance in finding what's going to work best. Again, why we're giving kind of this prep of all this. You guys have a challenge ahead of you of determining your suggestions. So, tax and collections, I just really trued up their budget to what their FTE is and how it works, based on ODR's recommendation. District attorney, so our DA is paid by the state of Oregon, so this would bring their 5 positions to 3 positions. It's about $190,000, I think, overall that was cut. And the reason being is that they have their DA2, they have an office manager, and they have a legal assistant. And those are the 3 that are in the DA. They had a DA3, I think, position available, and another legal assistant, I think it was, that this budget is potentially just going with the 3 positions that they have currently.
I think it was victims assistance,
Oh,
but they
that's
have,
what it
I think that's a
Grant.
grant-funded position as well, but
We are applying for a grant for the DA as well. That we would, it wouldn't be monies that would be available until October, but
That'll
potentially.
be just do something to add to the equation.
Add, and I would much rather add revenue
Yeah.
to a budget than have to increase expenditures because we're not getting the revenue. That's not the place to be in. So they did decrease their overall expenditures by $150,000 across the board. Clerk and reporting, as we went through, or as I went through, this is another one that I left at current staffing as I went through. The reason being is that we are coming out of a hat, and you have the clerks and that office that is trying to bring back all the stuff that was lost. We lost all digital.
So you don't think there's room
Stuff.
for some substantial cuts?
No, because there's only 4, well, there's only 3 regular staff, right, and you? 4, okay. So,
Just some history on that too.
Yeah.
So back in 2008, when we were doing that, we had separate floors and they were actually separate departments. And because we were asked to reduce, we reduced staff, moved to 1 floor, and then just conducted the election downstairs. And then I think in 20, I don't know, when the assessor moved over here, we were able to do 1 floor. And so all of my staff does elections and recording. And so we've been status quo with
yeah.
our FTEs since 2008. We have not increased.
And it's not, I know the commissioners are considering an agency to help get our records back
Right.
digital. And it's not like the clerk staff are gonna sit in the back and eat bonbons while somebody comes in
No.
and scans all their stuff. Really for us to get out of the emergency that we've been in, I think that's an area that it would be hard pressed, to cut. This is my opinion on adding that.
Well, and, Tina and I did discuss possibly doing away with the multiple budgets and just one budget, because we are on one floor, we could share office supplies and the things that are specific to the recording or elections office, we would have special line items for those.
Okay.
Because right now, we're doing a lot of work on claims, paying, 50% out of elections, 50% out of recording, 50% of my personnel out of elections,
And,
recording.
and that's something, in our final budget, I would like to combine all together and present that to you once we've decided where things are going. There's a lot of complicated hodgepodge budgety stuff that was done, that is really not unnecessary. That's why I'm trying to consolidate
Is
our
that's a
indirect.
technical term?
Yeah. Hodgepodge is actually
But budgety.
budgety stuff,
I just
yes.
hadn't-
Yeah, I just created that, it'll be in the dictionary next week. So, but I'm really trying to condense things, I did it for the fairgrounds, their budget that I presented to them. It's more transparent to, the layperson out there looking at a budget to see stuff under one line item and versus looking at, an FTE, well, we only have one clerk, but this doesn't equal what the wage it says she's making and yada yada, so
I'm pretty sure nobody understood the previous fair budget.
I had a hard time, but we worked through it. Any questions on anything thus far? Okay, so, juvenile, again, you're gonna see that, I balanced the budget, I put the transfer up top, where it needs to be. They did reduce, a little bit in FTE. They're limited on staff, and, again, it kind of is what it is. I'm giving you kind of a suggestion of what I think we could work with, but, ultimately, it's your call.
Okay.
Last, so this is the big one, this is the non-departmental fund. So, up at the top, as, the sheriff asked about the PILT monies, so yes, we are getting PILT monies. I don't think we have the actual number, correct?
Correct.
But we are getting, so what I did is I based, I looked at last year's taxes, increased it slightly. I think that prior year tax revenue was overstated last year because I went and looked back historically, so I reduced that a little bit. Electric co-ops, cable franchise fees, the BLM, or the Department of Interior and the BLM, the ONC, we're gonna get $1.17 million from them. They just sent that. We've got some other, PILT taxes that will be coming in around $900,000 is kind of what the thought is. Some other small, revenues, state tobacco tax, alcohol tax, amusement tax. I did away with the miscellaneous revenue. 50 grand of miscellaneous revenue in a fund that potentially short. That's banking on revenue that
This is
we're
stuff
most
we
likely not gonna
imagined.
get. So I did away with that. I'm not comfortable in a budget shortfall to put money in there when not guaranteed.
Yeah, many are lined up.
So, right? Allocated interest, that's interest on our bank accounts across the board. And then unassigned fund balance, that would be projected rollovers from this fiscal year 24 to fiscal year 25, which is about $2 million is what we anticipate. And then going through transfers. So I did the transfers of the general fund. There's other small transfers that the board and the budget committee need to make suggestions on. Well, I will put suggestions in when I'm bringing out the whole budget. But not putting in all those other fund transfers, that leaves us with about $4.3 million. It's better than last year's budget because I think it's more accurate. I don't think it's as alarming as I was originally going into, but we need to be cautious on over allocating ourselves in the event of any other mishaps taking place. I think that the Budget Committee and the Board of Commissioners, even though we are in a budget crisis, we need to kind of plan on putting a small contingency amount somewhere to protect us, whether it's $100,000, $200,000, but that would be my suggestion to the Budget Committee as we move forward with the general fund.
That would be a new wrinkle.
It's not a wrinkle.
What, save, it
You
would be
mean,
a new philosophy, let's put it that way. Instead of spending
It's
everything
something-
and burning the house down every single year, we should probably try
yeah,
to.
it's something that we need to plan for the worst every year in that aspect and try to make these funds a little bit bigger in the event that we have cyber issues, budget shortfalls across the board. And that's something that I would suggest proposing to you guys as we roll forward. So any questions about Sheriff's Department and the general fund? Sorry to be Debbie Downer across the board, but
So, what I'm hearing is, we were all told that, 31% cuts across the board. Now I'm hearing that there's departments and agencies or whatever that are gonna be status quo, and for various reasons. Let me remind everybody, public health, or public safety is the #1 priority in this county. And we deal with life and death situations every day. You cut that out, then we're dealing with death.
absolutely. Yeah, the assessor and taxation department, that was new to me. That was something that our assessor looked into when we were applying or getting ready to apply for the CAPA grant. And that was something I was unaware of until she reached out to the Department of Revenue and received that information. She did propose to them, we're gonna cut this.
I'm not arguing about
No,
that
I'm just
or
saying, yeah,
complaining
no.
about it. I'm just saying, public safety has got to be the #1 priority in this county.
I would agree that it's important, and that I would really hate to be this committee and have to.
Well, I mean,
to deal with this chaos,
I
but
mean, the issue of the assessor, for example, is a thing that, that it makes us money. Sheriff's Department costs us money. So it's just a different animal. You're investing and you're getting a return, you're increasing the tax base. So that's a thing, and also it's required by the state that we do that, and we lose big money if we don't. So that's, I mean, it's not a fair comparison.
No, but
we look at the other ones and we got, the other issues.
No, I will be as creative and as forthcoming as I can with all of you when it comes to budget and money that we have available. Absolutely. So if the levy doesn't pass, I will be working with each and every one of you to see what we can do to make things work for everyone.
I know it's difficult for everyone. and,
Oh, yeah, it's literally a crappy situation to be
But
in.
my job, is chief law enforcement of the county is for public safety.
Sure.
And I can't do my job without a funding solution.
Sure.
But aren't the departments that are mandated, if the levy doesn't pass, you're just requiring the county to keep mandated services? So some of the things in the sheriff's office is not mandated, and so you're asking to cut that, not the whole.
Yeah, well, those are gonna be the questions that we have to answer.
Yeah, those are the hard questions.
So,
We started across the board, came across some
Good idea.
things that we can't do across the board. Some departments such as the elections, they're mandated scenario, and their FT is well below as well, and hasn't gone up at all. And you can see that their FTE has been status. So, again, absolutely gonna work with each and every one of you to make sure that we can balance the best we can.
Question.
Yeah.
So I'm sure I'm not the first to ask this, but it makes sense to me. So taxation and assessment,
Yes.
they work for the county, but they also work for every taxing district we have. If you took the total tax revenue for our county, which is about $28 million, and you took the 5% administrative fee,
It doesn't cover swap.
it covers 1.4 million, which would be the assessor's budget. Is there a mechanism where we can charge a 5% administrative fee for those dollars collected for all these districts, including the county, that would go to the assessor? Because it makes sense that the assessor's paid through those dollars directly as the custodian. They're working for every district.
We can look into that.
And the treasurer as well, I mean, you know, as far as distributing
Sure.
the money,
So
I think those are
5%
legitimate
for
things.
42 districts?
Well, it would be 5% for every district, which would be $1.4 million of our total tax receipts collected, which would cover
Which
both.
is limiting.
It would cover actually it would get assessment, taxation, and the treasurer's office almost perfectly. Like,
I mean, the fund, as we've been talking about, the treasurer's
Those are the
duties,
monies
it's
that
been
could
pretty
go
clear
also.
that, you know, what we want the treasurer to be doing, a good portion of that is limiting, you know, to handling those tax revenues and distributions.
That is their
And
duty.
it seems like it would be reasonable that all of those, because otherwise, we just have a lot of people who are working for a lot of.
all these districts for free.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
free.
So what I'll do is I will reach out to the Department of Revenue and see if an administrative fee is something that we can charge out.
Okay.
And the county is required to pay for the city and the state elections. We don't get reimbursed for those. It's only the special districts
Yes.
that
Right.
we get to charge. So the clerks are working on legislative stuff to try to get money from the cities.
Did you work a little harder on that?
So,
Yeah, in all my spare time.
but these are the creative funding sources that we need to think about. And, you know, that's something I'll absolutely reach out to DOR and see if we can come up with any administration fees.
It seems like, we've been doing it to ourselves forever with all these, these transfers and
Oh.
occupancy and
We
all
haven't-
those.
I think it's pretty safe to say that we haven't been covering our own expenses in-house for a significant amount of time. The road department, that's a huge example. So they're only charging salary fringe and a very low hourly rate for their vehicles and equipment. That's another thing that Ted and I were talking about, that, you know, we need to bring up the charges for those equipment to be equivalent to others charging for equipment.
If you went to rent a piece of
And
equipment, yeah.
also for, you know, they don't just get salary fringe, they have that overhead cost that
If
we
you're a
need
private
to bill
business
out
and you
to.
do that, you go out of business.
Yes, exactly, and so that's what we're at.
I do remember reading something about the administrative cost. When you create a special district, you have to have the language of the administrative cost built into the special district. And if it's not, I don't know that you can go back and do it. But it's worth looking into.
Absolutely, there might be some,
Maybe just a county ordinance at the end of the
Well, yeah,
day.
and-
Who
and
knows?
So if that's the case, and, call me crazy, but it's possible, not probable, obviously, but it's possible that they could have been doing it wrong here from the beginning. And when if we've been approaching something completely wrong for, well, I mean, we were running into that yesterday at the road department, we're looking at stuff, and we're like, what are we doing here? We have to go back, and sometimes you have to acknowledge if there's been a mistake or an oversight, and then take whatever action you have to do to fix it. And this might be a way that we can do it, but just as we look organically at what we're doing, when Jay points out that there's a lot of money that is funneling right through this, and since I spend so much time with the road department, I feel like this is just a culvert and it all goes right through and
Just
maybe a
passes
couple of
through.
drops get stuck on the edge and something needs to be, rejiggered there.
Did you have a question?
Oh, I think I was going off of, Jay's, but, so as you're looking at the special districts, I mean, would that be that FTE number that comes back into play? I mean, you came up with 5%, but would it have to match?
No, special districts could be outside of that.
Okay, yeah, because this would just be for county departments.
Correct.
Yeah.
What we could do, though, is the overhead charge, that 2080 hourly cost of the $12 and some odd cents. That might be something that we can add on to ours. I mean, those are things that we need to evaluate when we go out and build things out. And when we're doing IGAs or MOUs or whatever we're doing, those are numbers that we need to take into consideration to adding on to our costs when we're charging somebody something, when coming up with an agreement or a contract. Those are
We
things
also
need
have to
take.
look closely at some of these other numbers. I was just noticing like the cable franchise fee.
There's other options.
There, as we go forward, it's like establishing the timber department. So that's the thing. We're gonna be building that. We'll be turning some of our lands into productive timberland that'll generate revenue that'll offset taxes down the road. But, we have not fully pursued the cable franchise fees, for example. And, that's our job. We need to do that so that we can actually tell the taxpayers that
It's standard.
It's no different than when we're at the road department yesterday and we're looking at the way that because everybody's comfortable with outdated systems and not moving forward, that we're basically handling individual hourly, time card or something. We're handling it 4 different times, and you just cut that out, and all of a sudden you have to look at your whole employee census. What are we doing? What do we need? And we're not there yet. We're getting there.
So, my suggestion to all of you is to review these, especially the sheriff's department, and thinking about ways within the general fund or elsewhere to come up with some funding in the event that the levy does not pass. And then I would propose that we set a meeting, the next meeting at the end of the month, once we know whether the levy is passed. And at that time, I would be working with the sheriff and Phil on solidifying what they would want as a budget, and we could bring a whole complete draft for you guys to look at and rearrange and do whatever you need to. Does that sound like a plan for everybody?
Yeah, one more question, Kina. And you may not have looked at this recently. I know when we were doing the town halls that the road fund reserve was 17 million-ish. Have you looked at that recently? Is that?
It's the same amount. That won't change because, so there's a difference between what's in
Right,
that
right.
pool. It's still, we haven't had any
And-
different funds going in and out.
And maybe just explain that again, because Dan's new, probably understands it, but just, I think it would be good to hear that again.
So we have LGPI, Local Government Investment Pool, so it's a state pool that we get a 5% return on, which is, fantastic. So we have road monies that are in one of the LGPI accounts, and they're in the road pool. There's $20 million, a little over $20 million in there. But a portion of that belongs to operating costs of the actual road still for FY #24. So after, or at year end, we project the ending fund balance for the road reserve to be about $17.5 million, which is the road's savings account essentially at fiscal year end. The other money is still operating costs for the road department.
And that whole amount is receiving 5% interest?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Yes,
Well,
so,
Because I remember there was something way
So
back
there's
that,
a 1.8 or something.
2.5.
Invested at a
So
lower
2.5 was taken out, but that wasn't taken out of the road, that was taken out of the county's pool account.
Oh, okay, okay.
Okay.
Yes, but we have a county's pool account and we have a road reserve account.
And they both earn 5%.
And they both earn 5%, and those are outside of our operating checking accounts. So, about $700,000 is the interest that the road has earned this year off of their $20 million.
I think we talked about it last time, the contingency fund that you had was pretty well eaten up on the cyber attack, right? Is there any
Oh,
left?
the ARP money,
Yeah,
American Rescue
Yeah,
Plan?
yeah. Is there any money's left?
There is money left over. So there's $500,000 left in the IT's department's fund to solidify all our IT infrastructure and such. And then there's about $800,000 that are in the American Rescue Plan left over. And I do know that our clerk has approached the commissioners of using that to help restore all our digital files that we lost countywide. All those historical property information and files, birth certificates, who knows what else is out there that it's required that the county have. But right now, we do not have them digitally anymore. And I believe that full amount would not restore us.
No, I
think
think
it
it
was
would take
one-
about $1.5 million.
That's what I was gonna say, I think it was about 1.5.
get-
1.2
So, but I
it
think
gets us back a few years.
it gets us in a
Yeah,
better
don't get us
place.
back to 1856.
Yeah,
And there's none of those expenses are in these?
no. In the IT department, I mean, they have that as designated funds for IT, for infrastructure.
We had to basically start over with a hardware, the hack actually destroyed a bunch of a lot of our hardware was out of date and it wasn't backed up, and the hack was actually devastating to it physically as well, because when everything got shifted, it just blew up a lot of stuff.
So the election's the 21st, Shelley? So, what's the consensus with everyone in terms of conflicts with the election being on the 21st? Anytime after that, we have probably sooner than later, I would imagine.
Yes, definitely sooner than later. Because I can't imagine we're gonna get it the first go around.
Well,
Unofficial results will be available at 8 o'clock on the 21st, so if you wanted to have it on the 22nd, already know.
I have that date already held for budget committee meeting.
22nd?
It's in our calendars already.
Okay. That works for everybody? Do you have a time on there, Jay?
It says 5:30.
That doesn't
But we
work
can
for
go,
me.
we can go earlier.
Yeah, if we could do it earlier in that day on the 22nd, because
I'll be out of town.
Can I set up a time with the sheriff and the captain to put together
Yeah,
budgets and
because
go
we
over?
can't give you decent numbers overnight.
No,
I mean,
no.
Yeah.
So if you and three of us can sit down and go through potentials of it not, and then, well, we have if it's not. But if it doesn't, and what you want, and then if it does.
And we're gonna have,
Well, absolutely, but that's what I want, I'm sure your FTE is gonna go up and all that stuff, so if we could set up a time for the three of us to go through and,
Does it have to be that week, because I'm scheduled to be out on
Not-
this conference,
which week are you gonna be gone?
the 21st through the 20,
Fourth.
Can we meet that week prior?
week prior, we fine.
Okay, I'll send you guys invites. Perfect. That way we can have it together after the on the 21st to just give to them.
And it's just the what ifs, right?
Yep. Well, how we want the world and what we would like if the budget doesn't pass. Or the budget.
So is everybody good with the 22nd at 1 PM?
No. Earlier, I gotta drive to Medford and fly out to Texas for graduation.
I'm glad you gave us a reason. I thought you were just gonna get belligerent.
No, no, my oldest grandson is graduating in Texas, so could we do it 22nd at 10 o'clock in the morning?
Well, like I said, if you want me to be there.
Well, yeah,
I'll
but
be
you-
there that week, it's gonna be the following week.
But this is mainly more for the budget committee. So,
And this will be giving them what you guys
It'll be,
want after we meet that the week prior.
it'll be at
Are we
first.
gonna be able to make a presentation of our own budget?
If you want.
I mean, that's just what we've always
Sure.
done, except for last year, it was just done for us.
Yeah, sure, I'm okay with that.
It's gonna be more of a
But this one's gonna be,
mental, okay, this is the direction we're going. It's gonna be a series of meetings. It's probably gonna span over a while.
So it's gotta be done before the end of June, so.
Well, I know, but I mean, so we can't really wait until,
I imagine once the news comes through, it'd be almost bi-weekly meetings.
we're gonna have to figure it out.
Initially, yeah.
Maybe a series of meetings through the week.
So on the 22nd, is 10 AM good?
It hurts, but it's okay. I gotta close my truck, but it's not the end of the world.
drive it down here, we'll
Yeah.
have a breakfast truck.
That's not a bad idea. I can change some stuff around here, so.
If everybody agrees, we'll do the 22nd at 10 AM.
Are you able to be here?
I can, the sheriff won't be here.
Yeah.
Are you okay with that?
Oh. What was it?
and like I said, I'll send
I just blame him for anything that goes wrong.
That's great.
All right, any other,
Shel-
any other discussion?
I was just gonna ask Shelley, by that morning, the 22nd, we'll pretty much know,
You'll know at 8 o'clock on the.
Okay.
first official results, when we'll have now the postmark rule and.
What's the-
Results will change a little bit.
what's the official day?
21 days after.
Oh, okay, so,
We don't have 21 days.
no.
How long will it take before the mail-in ballots come in, like, go with the discussion?
We're already getting out.
Oh, really?
The ballots got out today, so people should either get on Friday or tomorrow.
Any further questions for Keena?
Thank you, Keenan.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. All right, then we will conclude this meeting and we will reconvene on the 22nd at 10 AM. Thanks, everybody.